Well, hello, lovely humans. Welcome back to my podcast. I was about to say channel. My name is Jamie Wolfer. This is the Lovely Humans Club podcast. You're either watching this on YouTube or listening to it wherever podcasts are played. And I'm a wedding planner turned content creator who decided to start a podcast because how cliche. Any hoodles. The other day I jumped on Instagram to crowdsource ideas for what to record for the podcast because starting a podcast sounds like a great idea, right? You're like, this is going to be so cool. I have so much to talk about. And then you sit down to record it and you're like, oh, wait, do I? Do I have a lot to talk about? I don't know. And then you start to second guess everything you even do know that you can talk about. And you're like, is this... And of course, this comes on like the heels of making a lot of content every single week. So I've got my main channel. I'm a wedding planner by trade, although I don't have any events right now because I've got a spicy Velcro baby. So I've got wedding planning content that comes out on Tuesdays. I try to have 2 to 3 videos go live on my personal channel, including the podcast, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I feel like I've really officially switched the Thursday upload to Friday, which is a ton of long form content. I mean, we're talking like produced probably 2 hours worth of content a week. The time it takes to record, way more. So for me, it's super easy and actually super helpful to jump over to Instagram and be like, what do you want to talk about? Hey, we're getting coffee tomorrow in the podcast, which I currently have mine right here. So I hope you have yours as well. What do you want to chat about? Like, what do you want to know? And there's a topic that I brought up in the very first episode where I talk about being a single mom. And then I went on Instagram and I was like, if you have any questions, like, let me know. And I was not expecting there to be a flood of questions. I knew there'd be some, but I wasn't expecting there to be a flood of questions about the girl's biological father. And I avoided it. And I didn't want to talk about it because I don't have nice things to say. Let's just rip off the Band-Aid. I don't. Not in the picture. Not supportive. Has never been, is aware, and is a very unhealthy human who did some truly unforgivable things. We were in a relationship and it ended horribly. I'm not going to go into details. I'm sure you could picture how a relationship could end horribly. This got dark real fast. I'm so sorry. But the girls don't know him, and if I have anything to say about it, hopefully they never will. And if you've been around here long enough, you know enough about my personality. It's that seems like an unusual thing for me to say. But in this instance, I very, very much truly mean it. I had gotten myself into, well, if we rewind, as a young girl, I was always really interested in boys. Just super interested. I think I had my first boyfriend in 7th grade. Like, bleh. But I also felt like I had to, if someone liked me, I had to like them back. This is all retroactively unpacking this, by the way. Like it's not like I was aware of this when I was in 7th grade. And it's not like I actually had a boyfriend in 7th grade. I just found myself really, really interested. And I'm sure my parents were like, oh, that's cute. You think you have a boyfriend. I proceeded to then have several more relationships throughout high school. And in some of them, I stayed in them because the person was nice. They liked me a lot or they loved me. But I had like a little bit of that ick factor in my gut. And I didn't really listen to it a lot. To the point where I was like, I dated a couple people I wasn't even physically attracted to because they were nice. And our beliefs aligned or what we wanted out of life aligned, but maybe I wasn't like the most attracted to them, or maybe there was like one big character ick and I would completely ignore it. And so I developed this pattern, this habit of like going into these dating relationships and just being like, I can look past it. What I ended up getting myself into, however, was a lot of codependent relationships, quite a few. Well, not where I was codependent, but where the person was codependent on me, or like I attracted this codependent vibe. I put it out there. I don't even know how I did. Where this will make sense if like you've been in a relationship like this, where like my boyfriend at the time would do a bunch of stuff for me, like just to be super extra nice and kind of go over the top to the point where it kind of felt like I was being placed on a pedestal, and it just made me really uncomfortable, and I didn't like it. But of course, I didn't do anything about it. I didn't know how to date. I didn't know how to date. You can bet your bottom dollar that when my girls decide to start dating, or when we allow them to start dating, that I'm going to be giving them a little bit more pointers. I mean, no shade to my mom. Maybe she wasn't even thinking about it. I don't know. Or maybe she did give me pointers. I don't recall. So when I found myself in relationships that weren't like that didn't have that codependent feeling, I was like, this is incredible. This is great. Unfortunately, there were a few that were not great and they were not kind. But I didn't know what to look for in dating, because I was like, either I get codependent and get the ick, or I get this with this kind of personality, or that does this thing that really bothers me or embarrasses me or hurts my feelings. But I just was kind of just accepting of all of the character traits of anybody that I dated as like, this is who I'm with, and this is what it is. To the point where it got me in like some really terrible situations. And the girl's biological dad is one of those. I think that's why, now that I'm saying this all out loud, I think that's why I friend zoned Elias for a really long time. Elias, if you're new here, Elias is my husband. I love him very much, very, very much. He came into the girls' lives right before they turned 2, I think. Yeah, after they turned 2, somewhere in there. I think maybe 2. Okay, let's call it 2. And he is the only dad they've ever known. And he's incredible, and they call him dad, and they love him. We are all obsessed with him. But it took me a minute to kind of understand that like this was okay and this was a healthy relationship. Don't get me wrong, like we still fight. We still have things that we're working through. But I didn't know how to receive it because I'd never experienced it before. I think it's the part of like the 3 in me. If you're into the Enneagram at all, I'm an Enneagram 3. The Enneagram is my favorite personality test in the entire world. I will link it in the show notes if you want to take it. I have never felt so seen or so understood by a test in my life, especially when my husband did it and I did it. And then we read how our numbers interact in our relationship and how we treat each other and how we could be strong and how we could be weak. Incredible. But I'll go ahead and read to you a little bit. And obviously, you guys being my friends are going to crack up hearing some of this, okay? So Enneagram type 3 is the achiever. Success-oriented, pragmatic type, adaptable, excelling, driven, and image-conscious. Yep. 3s are self-assured, attractive, and charming. Ambitious, competent, and energetic. They can also be status-conscious and highly driven for advancement, she says on her 3rd podcast. They're diplomatic and poised, but also can be overly concerned with their image and what others think of them. They typically have problems with workaholism and competitiveness. At their best, they're self-accepting, authentic in everything they seem to be, role models who inspire others. Basic fear of being worthless. Basic desire to feel valuable and worthwhile. So I'm an Enneagram 3 with a 2 wing, so I'm known as the charmer. Key motivators: wants to be affirmed, to distinguish themselves from others, to have attention, to be admired, and to impress others. So we might get a little bit in the weeds here, but like bear with me. You have kind of like triads. So at my core, I'm a 3. When I'm stressed, I start behaving like a 9. And when I'm healthy or showing growth, I start behaving like a 6. So here's what the triad means for me. When moving in their direction of disintegration, stress, driven 3s suddenly become disengaged and apathetic at 9. And a 9 is known as the peacemaker. So when I'm stressed out, I go quiet. I don't cause a ruckus. I don't want to make waves. When I'm uncomfortable, I shut down with a basic fear of loss and separation and basic desire to have inner stability and a peace of mind. So I would get in these relationships, whether codependent or super unhealthy, and if something popped up that made me feel the ick in either direction, I would just shut down. And this honestly is why I really, really enjoy the Enneagram, because it helps me to understand, because I can now better spot when I'm responding to things in an unhealthy manner. If I start shutting down, now I shut down generally speaking. Like if my husband frustrates me or hurts my feelings, I shut down. If I've got a lot going on with work, which right now I've got a ton going on with work, I shut down. I get in my head. I have conversations before I have the conversations. If you know, you know. I try to plot out every single possible direction the conversation could go. I get very internal and very much in my own head. And it's taken me a while to kind of unpack the reason that I do that is I want to use the correct phrasing so people won't be mad at me. And it's taken me a while to kind of unpack the fact, and this is like real core, like breaking it down. I can sometimes be so worried about what people think about me that I want to be careful of what I say because I don't want them to judge me based off of it. I don't want them to be mad at me based off of it. And if waves are already being made, I don't want to make any, so I'm just going to stay quiet and let things happen. And it doesn't take a psychology degree to tell you that that is not a healthy way of dealing with things. Now returning to the other angle of the triad, however, when moving in their direction of integration, growth, vain, deceitful 3s, well, that brute, become more cooperative and committed to others like healthy 6s. Check this out. 3s try to deny their shame and are potentially the most out of touch with underlying feelings of inadequacy. 3s learn to cope with shame by trying to become what they believe a valuable, successful person is like. Thus, 3s learn to perform well, to be acceptable, even outstanding, and are often driven relentlessly in their pursuit of success as a way of staving off feelings of shame and fears of failure. If I break up with this person, it'll be a failed relationship. If I break up with this person who's really nice and really kind to me, even though they give me the ick, people will think I'm mean. Now, again, these were not forward-facing thoughts. These are things that, like, retroactively I've gone back in and kind of deconstructed to be like, what was that? Now, when I'm moving towards growth, I start displaying personality traits of a 6, which is known as the loyalist. Cute. We love that. Engaging, responsible, anxious, and suspicious. Okay. The committed, security-oriented types. 6s are reliable, hardworking, responsible, and trustworthy. Excellent troubleshooters. They foresee problems and foster cooperation, but can also become defensive, evasive, and anxious, running on stress while complaining about it. Okay. So when I'm at my healthiest, I become so much more independent. I got it. I can troubleshoot it. I can figure it out on my own. And this is why I love the Enneagram so much, because it perfectly explains, my behavior based on wherever I'm at mentally, or wherever my mental health game is at. So if I'm doing really well, I'm independent, I'm making videos, I'm getting all this stuff out, I've got ideas, I'm going for it. When I'm not doing well, I go quiet, I become the peacemaker, I don't want to ruffle feathers. Oftentimes, now you're gonna know, if I skip an upload, it's because I get overwhelmed with like this crippling fear of whatever content you're gonna make is not gonna be good enough, or there's so much going on with life and with business that I just don't have it in me, that I'm afraid that whatever video or podcast I create in this moment is going to be absolute garbage. So I just skip it. I would sometimes rather not have an upload than put something up that I'm not proud of or feel yuck about. But unfortunately, sometimes my internal monitor of that is not great. So that's why I think it's really important. And this is why faith is really important to me. This is why the time spent in self-reflection and in prayer is super important to me, because I can tell if I know, and my dad, I think he said this recently, the Enneagram isn't to tell you where you're at currently, because you probably know that really well. It really glaringly points out when you're healthy and when you're unhealthy. These are your behavioral patterns. And so when I start seeing those things popping up, I'm like, I think I need to spend a little bit more time in the Word. I think I need to spend a little bit more time in prayer, because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. He's got all this planned out. So if I'm shutting down, I'm going to my 9, I'm just letting things happen to me instead of being assertive and taking care of business and being independent, then I know that I'm not in a great place mentally. And I'm reading all of this off the Enneagram Institute.com. By the way, if you want to go check this out, take the test. Like, please, please, please take the test. It's wild. And they have different articles or different blog posts or whatever about how different numbers interact with one another. And so years ago, I found the one where my husband is an Enneagram 1, which I'll explain in just a moment, how an Enneagram 1 and an Enneagram 3 interact. What's their high points, what's their low points, etc. And just as like a brief description, an Enneagram 1 is known as the reformer. Principled, purposeful, self-control, and perfectionistic. 1s are conscientious and ethical, with a strong sense of right and wrong. They are teachers, crusaders, and advocates for change, always striving to improve things, but afraid of making a mistake. Well-organized, orderly, and fastidious, they try to maintain high standards, but can slip into being critical and perfectionistic. They typically have problems with resentment and impatience. At their best, they are wise, discerning, realistic, and noble, and can be morally heroic. Basic fear of being corrupt/evil or defective. Basic desire to be good, to have integrity, to be balanced. This is my husband. This is my husband to a T. And I also love on this website, they actually list famous people that are the same number as you. So when we're looking at our relationship together, and if I had known about this years ago when I was dating, I would have been all over this, because it would have pointed out really, really unhealthy behaviors that I was feeding into. So let's listen to this. Enneagram 1s and 3s are both competent, serious-minded, and idealistic. This is a highly task-oriented relationship with both partners driven to hard work and to be intensely aware when, individually and collectively, they are not measuring up to their own expectations and high standards. Both parties can bring selflessness, self-discipline, good work habits, and the ability to put aside their personal feelings for the sake of the objective good that needs to be done. Both types are used to working so hard that they often succeed, garnering admiration from those around them and attaining places of leadership and responsibility. The 1 and 3 combination can be dazzlingly accomplished, high energy, extraordinarily competent, and impressive both individually and collectively. They both strive after excellence, both as an ideal and as something to personally embody. Sometimes they succeed so well that this pairing virtually glows with self-confidence and the thrill of their own talents. They strive to make each other proud of them, someone the other can look up to and show off to his or her friends and family. They enjoy planning and organizing their lives, dividing up responsibilities after seeing who is objectively better at which tasks. Both thrive on respect and give each other the personal space. There are only 2 other equally goal-oriented pairings, a 1 and 1 combination and a 3 with a 3 pairing. Although since these both are same type pairings, they typically have blind spots that these combinations will need to be aware of. Because the 1-3 is a mixed pair, this produces a powerful coalition that is capable of dealing both with ideals and practical matters. They will try to solve problems in the relationship by discussing the issues involved, since neither likes emotionally charged bickering or unresolved issues. 1s help 3s to be more grounded and realistic. 3s help 1s to stretch themselves and not be so perfectionistic. This is my relationship, guys. They are both industrious and persistent, efficient and concerned with excellence and with making a real difference in the world. Now, here's where this was really, this got us pretty good. Because, I mean, the paragraphs that I just read, of course, dazzlingly, they're fantastic together. They're like an unstoppable duo. They're so obnoxious. I want to gag reading that. I love my relationship, but that just makes us sound obnoxious, right? But don't worry, there's an entire section dedicated to potential trouble spots or issues. And when my husband and I read this, we were like, oh my gosh. If this relationship gets into trouble, it's often over time commitments, lack of emotional attachment to each other, and a creeping sensation of competition. Further, 1s tend to find 3s too workaholic, pragmatic, and too concerned with image and with their reputations rather than with principle. 1s can see 3s as tending to cut corners in ethical matters, willing to exaggerate or fudge the truth in order to achieve whatever they are after. They can also become critical of 3s if they change their goals pragmatically, dropping efforts or switching positions when something does not work for them. 1s may also have issues with 3s attempting to reinterpret ethical questions and with not owning up to their personal behavior, including their behavior regarding fidelity in the relationship itself. Oh, that one does not apply to us. On the other hand, 3s tend to find 1s too rigid and judgmental in their attitudes and inflexible in various areas. While 3s generally value 1's organizational ability and ability to get things done, 3s can also feel that 1s are too narrow-minded and methodical, too perfectionistic and focused on details rather than results. 3s may have issues with 1s about feeling they are stifled or judged both for their attitudes and for their actions. 3s thrive on praise, but stressed 1s are unable to give any credit to themselves, much less anyone else. 3s see 1's critiques of them as nitpicking and time wasting. Oh my gosh, I'm exposing my entire relationship to you right now. Eventually, 3s start avoiding 1s, triggering 1's abandonment issues. Oh my gosh, and more anger and criticism. I have not read this in years. Both gradually lose respect for the other. 1's losing respect for 3's integrity, and 3's losing respect for 1's effectiveness. An open break can occur, but if both find the relationship useful, it can endure as a professional marriage without much passion because it's useful to both parties for their continued professional success and personality status. I will say not all of that applies. That's not like a direct, it says where we could end up going if we're unhealthy. Now, what does any of this have to do with failed relationships in the past? If I had known myself better, I might not have made these same choices. If I had access to something like this or knew that this is how I behave when I'm stressed and this is how I behave when I'm healthy, it would better pinpoint, maybe you're not making good decisions right now. Now, does that excuse anyone else's behavior? No. But in order for me to grow as a human, I need to know how I operate, right? I need to know what I'm doing when I'm healthy. I need to know what I'm doing when I'm not healthy. I need to know what my strengths are. I need to know what my weaknesses are. And I'd like to think I'm pretty self-aware, but I am definitely still a work in progress. Still figuring some of that stuff out. There are different, they call them centers. The Enneagram's like a 3x3. So there's 9 numbers, 1 through 9, and they all have different personality types. And usually you have a wing, and that wing is the number that's directly next to yours. So I would either be a 3-wing 2 or a 3-wing 4. I'm a 3-wing 2. So a lot of what I'm explaining here might just sound like absolute gibberish, but obviously there's 9 numbers, and they can be separated into 3 separate groups. And each of these groups have different centers. So 2, 3, and 4 are in the feeling center. We're in our feels, baby. 5, 6, and 7 are in the thinking center. They're big time up here in the brain noggin. And then 8, 9, and 1 are in the instinctive center. They go based off instincts. And then there's a dominant emotion associated with that 3x3 pattern as well. For example, 5, 6, 7, their dominant emotion is fear. 8, 9, and 1, their dominant emotion is anger or rage. Now remember, we're not saying that this is all they feel, but this is can be a core motivational factor. Like a 1 could make a decision because they're angry, because you said something that called their character into question. 5 might spend a lot of time researching something for fear of not making an informed decision. So they're going to get into the weeds and learn everything they can about this hyper-specific topic out of fear of the unknown. And then 2, 3s, and 4s, their dominant emotion is shame. And learning this has been clutch for me, because I make a lot of decisions based on the fact that I don't want to feel shame. And let me tell you, when you come home pregnant at 20, single, pregnant at 20, when your father is a pastor, you're going to automatically feel that. Right? Like even if you're not in the shame triad or whatever, you're going to feel that. So learning how much of my behavior is because I want to avoid feeling shame has been really important. Threes try to deny their shame and are potentially the most out of touch with underlying feelings of inadequacy. Threes learn to cope with shame by trying to become what they believe a valuable, successful person is like. Thus, threes learn to perform well, to be acceptable, even outstanding, and are often driven relentlessly in their pursuit of success as a way of staving off feelings of shame and fears of failure. For me, a recentering here that is the most important is, as I touched on earlier, faith. Because if I believe I am who he says I am, who God says I am, what is there to be afraid of? If I believe that he has made me in his own image, what is there to be ashamed of? Yes, I can be ashamed of decisions, but why am I letting that impact me in such a deep and palpable manner? Why am I allowing that to be the rudder that dictates so many of my actions and emotions? What started off as a somewhat painful podcast to make, I hope is turning into something that you might find helpful. I highly encourage you to check out the Enneagram. I think once you take the test and you get your number and you read a little bit more about yourself, you might go, oh my goodness. I'm so grateful I have this information. I can now implement it with my spouse. I can implement it with my parents. I can implement it with my close relationships. I can implement it with some random person at the grocery store. I can implement it with my kids. This has changed how I parent. Am I getting mad at my kids for a just reason? Or is there some undercurrent of shame that's the rudder to my decisions or my actions? A great example of that is apologizing to my kids, letting them know that I feel ashamed of my behavior, not hiding it, not covering it up, and really kind of unpacking those. Here's what I was feeling in that moment. I'm so sorry I responded in this way. That's not a natural bent for a three, but because I know that I can work on it, because I know that I can try intentionally to overcome that and communicate to my kids in an effective way that makes them feel heard and seen, and I'm still owning up to my stuff and not letting my shame dictate and drive how I respond. As a wife, as a mom, as a YouTuber, as a daughter, as a friend. So if you were interested in this sounds like the longest ad for the Enneagram ever. It's not. It changed my life. It changed my relationship. It changed how I viewed past relationships, past behavior, and it's changed how I parent over the last 15 years. Learning more about myself and recognizing areas that I need to grow in and recognizing what I do when I'm shutting down. Because when I can spot it, I can fix it, I can correct it, and I can show back up for my kids. So that's all we have for today, guys. Thank you so much for listening or watching if you're over on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, wherever you are listening or watching, go leave it a little 5-star review for me if you will. Because as always, it means the absolute world to me when you do. I didn't read one in today's episode because we kind of just launched into it because I was uncomfortable about the question and we just needed to rip off the Band-Aid. But I'm really grateful for those of you that have left reviews. Super, super thankful. And until next time, bye guys.